Hello, I'm Bookface. I have watched a lot of horror movies, and my favorite kind are, unsurprisingly, the ones that mention folklore and myth. But something that frustrates me a lot when I'm watching these movies is when the movie will say something like, this creature is from this mythology or this folklore, and then I'm like, oh, cool, let me look that up. And I look up exactly what they said, and it doesn't exist. Or at the very least is really hard to find. Sometimes it's because they just flat out made it up and said it was from mythology. Sometimes it's just really that obscure. So with this series called What Is This? I'm going to be looking at those things. I'm going to try to walk you through my researching process to narrow down what a creature is, or at the very least, any creatures from the mythology in question that resemble it or may have inspired it, even if there wasn't any inspiration. It was just somebody wanted to make a monster and give it cool points by saying it's from folklore. So, the first movie on my list, Prey. So let's ask, what is the Mupitsl? So, Prey is the most recent addition to the Predator series of movies. If you're unfamiliar, it's an alien, comes to Earth, and really likes killing people. Kind of like a sports hunter. But what makes this one unique to the other ones is that instead of soldiers in a jungle or police officers in the city, the Predator finds himself amongst the Comanche tribe during roughly colonial times. I think they said the exact time in the movie, but I don't really care that much. It's not relevant to my research. I'll keep the summary relatively brief, considering how new it is. I watched it the day it started streaming. So basically, this Comanche lady, Naru, wants to be a hunter. And she mentions a special kind of hunt where you are also being hunted at the same time, which is a perfect fit for this series. Not my series, for the Predator movie. It's kind of the whole point of Predator movies, so it works. Hunter and the hunted at the same time. Near the beginning of the movie, she sees the Predator's ship, and at first, due to the whole cloaking and weird sci-fi looking look to it, aptly said, she thinks it's Thunderbird, which, I could also talk about, but that's actually a very well-known figure in Native American myth, so I don't really think I need to right now. This is about the Mupitsl. Later on in the movie, about maybe halfway in, she encounters the Predator in person, and boy is it quite an appearance. Long story short, with summarizing the rest of the plot, she ends up throwing down with the Predator in a very Home Alone planning kind of way. And also, there's annoying French people. My personal notes on this movie, the fight choreography alone immediately makes this better than any of the other Predator movies by far. And I think most people are agreeing with that. Okay, so you might notice, Mupitsl did not come up in that at all. Well, that's because it was in a single line in the movie that most people probably just didn't really pay much attention to. But my mythology ears just honed in on it like, target acquired. So at one point in the movie, Naru is nearly killed by a bear, but the Predator jumps in to kill it instead, which is how she is initially introduced to it. After this encounter, she runs into some other people from her tribe and tells them what happened. When they ask, well, what is it? She tells them that it resembled a Mupitsl, which I immediately looked up and found nothing. And then the hunt was on. I found my prey. Also, just want to say with the spelling, I had closed captions on, so that's how the captions spelled it. So I don't know if the captions just got it wrong or if it's something else, but I typed it in exactly as it was written, and I just kept getting directed back to the movie. So first things first, I decided, I should compile some details so I can narrow down the options. First off, her guess the Mupitsl obviously can't be based on any details she learns about the Predator after that point, since she doesn't mention it again. And since she only saw it in person in that one scene, basically her entire comparison hinges on what happened in, I believe, less than 5 minutes, plus perhaps some minor details she noted from before, when she hadn't really identified anything yet. So we can assume this thing is a humanoid creature, very strong, and has big sharp claws, since, well, the Predator is a large humanoid creature with blades that kind of look like claws. In this scene, it was largely invisible, and they made a point to say that she only saw it when it was covered in blood, which could possibly indicate maybe some kind of spirit, that or generally some sort of magical creature, fairy-esque. From the comments of the fellow Comanche, who she tells the story, who then say it's something like a kid's story, it's likely a form of boogeyman, since those are mostly the figures that are told to children, especially if they're intimidating ones. Also, a possible detail that isn't mentioned until later, but Naru determined that the creature doesn't attack anyone who's unarmed, which, very good observation. Now granted, this could have been noted at 2 points. One, when she got away from it after it killed the bear, and a few minutes later, after she had said the Mupitsl thing, when she got caught in a bear trap. So it's unclear if that was apparent to her or if she figured that out after she compared it to the Mupitsl. Some other minor details that may have come into play: that she found a snake skinned by the predator, and that she saw very large footprints of a creature standing on 2 feet that looked like a bear's paw prints. So with that, we have a general outline of what we're looking for. So on to research. So the first guess I came to in my research was one that I hated to even suggest, because people have messed with the details of this thing way too much, and it's just so overused and so weirdly represented and messed up in so many different interpretations: the Wendigo. Now, if you know anything about the Wendigo mythology and its representation in pop culture, you'd be aware it's really just not used right. People bend the myth and story in so many different ways just to make something cool. So let me explain my logic as to why Wendigo seems like an option. So first off, the Wendigo myth almost always describes them as large humanoids with immense strength and sharp claws. Additionally, I'm just realizing this now, the Wendigo is often also depicted with a deer skull, and the predators often wear a skull-looking mask. In some stories, the Wendigo can shapeshift to avoid detection. A person will hear somebody walking behind them, but when they turn around to see what it is, the Wendigo will have turned into a rock or a log or just generally hidden itself. And while this isn't the same thing, it is very similar to the whole cloaking thing, or at the very least it keeps that essence. As for the only killing threats, that's not really a Wendigo thing, but I had a theory that perhaps the idea is that since the Wendigo is known for being very sadistic, that maybe it would only hunt things that hunt back, some sort of sick game. That one's a bit of a stretch because I kind of had to come up with that explanation on my own, but I do think it makes sense. And finally, the Wendigo is often used as a boogeyman figure, and the myth is fairly widespread. Unfortunately, what this guess has against it is the fact that the location really just doesn't line up. Most Wendigo myths come from the general northeast of North America, Canada, and northern US, largely around the Great Lakes, where this movie takes place in present-day Oklahoma, pretty far from the range of the Wendigo myth. Also, even though I did kinda come up with an explanation, if we're to compare it to the Predator, the Wendigo in no way has this honorable code that it follows. It just kills, whereas the Predator seems to have standards for what it kills. So probably not a Wendigo, but it is worth an honorable mention. The next thing I found in my research was Mo-Cho-Rook. So basically he's a brutal warrior who would kill anything in his path. He took no prisoners, which, pretty fitting to the Predator, who is incredibly brutal and will kill in a heartbeat. And in the source I found, at least, it did cite him as sort of a boogeyman figure sometimes. The problem with this one, though, is that he doesn't really seem so much as a supernatural figure as much as maybe even a real person. And considering all the crazy things the Predator does, and the Predator is shown to be able to do in his first appearance to Naru, it's kind of a necessity that whatever it is have some kind of supernatural ability. Also, I didn't fully look into the whole Mo-Cho-Rook thing just because it was a long paper and I was pretty sure it wasn't it. So I might be missing some details, but another video, because I do not think Mo-Cho-Rook is the Predator. So I thought about it for a bit, with Wendigo being my best guess even though I didn't want it to be. But then I had an idea. So since the Wendigo was such a close guess, I tried to search if there was some Comanche version of the Wendigo myth, which is to say something in the category of cannibal giant, because that's the category that the Wendigo falls into. And suddenly, I found it. Scrolling through random websites, Mupitsl. Fun fact, I was actually on a call with some friends when I found it, and they got to watch me just absolutely lose my mind and rush to go get my books. Got the dog sitting in here with me now. Well, now he's thumping things. In or out, dog? I'm recording something. Okay, I might have to adjust the audio a bit. So Mupitsl is a cannibalistic monster, sometimes a cave-dwelling ogre, but sometimes a giant owl person, which is not very predator-looking, but I mean, since owls are silent and come out after dark, maybe there's some comparison there with the cloaking. It liked to prey on humans, and mostly children, and was often seen as an evil spirit, which is another, probably more likely, explanation for the invisibility. It stood 12 feet tall and was covered in hair, and had very large feet, so yeah, kinda Bigfoot-esque. mask, and it was also a boogeyman figure. But here's the best part, which I didn't even have in my notes, but works. So despite what I said, Mupitsl isn't a completely evil force, but rather a big dangerous creature that in a way represented the balance of nature. You know, the whole survival of the fittest thing, I'm guessing. Almost like the exact characterization of the predators. Not being evil per se, but simply being really strong hunters that focus on creatures at the top of the food chain. So, ultimately, it was a misspelling. For all I know, it was meant to be written like that in the movie, and the captions just got it wrong. I'm not sure if the spelling in the movie was either like a variant spelling, or if what I found was some obscure variant of the spelling. Though probably not that one, since I could actually find this one. This was a fun little thing to do, but also kind of mentally exhausting. Just having to comb through every single kind of source I have and just not being able to look by the name, but just the details. I had to check so many very weird sources and get very creative. But I think that's kind of why I enjoyed it. Instead of just copying my own version of notes of myths and such, I actually had to find the myth and find all the details. Granted, I'm still just copying the details and putting them in the script, but it was a lot more of a challenge. It was a journey. If you liked this video, please leave a thumbs up, comment down below, and subscribe. If you have any movie, game, book, something that has some supposedly mythological figure that you can't really identify as belonging to any mythology, let me know. I might do my own little investigation into it, and I will see you next time. Bye!